Water is in your coffee and your sewage. Do I have your attention now? Not only plants, but even AI needs water to grow, indirectly as an input. What I'm trying to say is water is critical and scarce as a resource. So how could it affect the economy across sectors? And how can you invest in it? We'll break it down all right now on UBS Trending. Hi everyone and welcome to UBS Trending. I'm your host for today, Amantia Muhedini, filling in for Anthony. And excited to be joined here in the studio today by my teammates, Michelle and Antonia, joining us virtually to discuss a topic that is of increasing attention, investing in water-related opportunities. So welcome, Michelle and Antonia. And Michelle, let's start with you. At the beginning of this calendar year, we discussed investing in natural resources and water specifically as one of our ideas for themes to watch in 2024. Tell us a little more about why water matters from an economic or an investment sense.
Yeah, it's very easy to see the obvious ways in which water is important to our lives, right? Drinking water, number one, hygiene, showers, all of that. But water actually touches our economy in a number of ways that might be a little bit less obvious. Industrial processes, for one example, food, we all know and love it, or at least I do. That's a good example as well. 72% of freshwater use is agriculture. But then there's also things like power, right? Think about hydropower, which can be substantial depending on what region of the world that you're in. But also nuclear power, too, uses water as an input. And then there's the idea of shipping and transport. So the Panama Canal doesn't do us much good if there's no water in it to actually move those goods. So water is very much connected to our economy in a number of ways.
That's right. And I mean, I think we're safe on oceans. We'll come back to that. But what's interesting about that chart that you're showing is agricultural use, 71% globally. That speaks to the population demand for food. But here in the US, actually, and in developed countries, the chart is a little flipped. It's industrial use, what you're describing, power, energy. I made a joke about AI. Semiconductors require water as an input, and this is fresh water that we're talking about. Now, salty water, oceans also are very important, and maybe Antonia, to bring you into this conversation, tell us a little more about how oceans are also tied to economic activity.
Yeah, sure. And ocean is responsible for around 30 million jobs worldwide. It provides essential protein to over 3 billion people, generates 50% of our oxygen, which helps us, live, breathe, move every day. And these are just some of the critical elements of what we call the blue economy, which is expected to reach $3 trillion in value by 2030. So definitely a very important element of our ecosystem, provides a lot of essential services to our economies and livelihood, and can be neglected.
Yeah, and what's interesting is some of the challenge that investors may have is they recognize the importance of oceans or of fresh water, but we don't think about how it can be investable. Why does it matter to portfolios? Michelle, how are the ways in which we can guide towards investable opportunities here?
Yeah, well, I think Antonia just did a good job of giving the size of how much the oceans touch and how much economic activity is really tied to water. I think in the near term, one opportunity that we see is related to water infrastructure, as that's enjoying some tailwinds in the U.S. from the infrastructure spending that was actually passed a couple years ago now. Takes some time for that to flow through, but what you can see from the chart here is that we are seeing construction on conservation and development, so that's things like dredges, sea walls, and as well as water supply infrastructure construction, that's growing too. So there's some engineering and construction companies that have unique exposure here, and their water pipelines are growing. I would say more broadly, there's also some ties to our circular economy theme here. Again, I know Antonia mentioned the blue economy and oceans. It's hard to ignore plastic waste, right? So that's a very hard problem to solve. But in the interim, one thing that we've seen is there's now a premium for recycled plastic. So companies are trying to use more recycled plastic rather than virgin plastic. And the recyclers in the interim are getting a higher price for that recycled plastic. So I think there's some near-term opportunities in the industrial sector.
Yeah, truly some lateral thinking here that also I'm hearing, right? Like we're saying oceans and you're talking about plastic. Well, it's important as an investment opportunity there, but also to avoid the pollution and preserve the ecosystem. And this applies globally, really. Maybe, Antonia, you can share a little more about kind of what are the ways to integrate these longer-term sustainability considerations in this discussion.
Yeah, and Michelle already mentioned that. I mean, plastic being one of the foremost threats to our ocean, but also a necessary byproduct of our economic activity. So I guess that's just one example of things that we do that our economies depend on, our companies depend on, our livelihood depends on, that we can't just stop tomorrow. So the question is, how can we gradually minimize that harm, the negative impact on our water resources, whether freshwater or ocean, over time? And I guess sustainability-focused investors often toy with this concept of engagement, strategic engagement. How can you actually take companies on this journey of minimizing harm, on this journey of improving their products, their services, the way they do business, in order to be able to be less harmful? And here in the context of water or oceans, we're thinking of packaging and shipping, of tourism and hospitality, we're thinking of port infrastructure and fishing companies. These are just some examples of industries that are likely to be quite impacted.
I'm really glad that Antonia just mentioned how hard of a challenge solving this plastic waste problem really is, and that we can't just stop tomorrow. And what I think is interesting about that is that there are a lot of really hard challenges to solve, plastic being one of them. But when you think about water infrastructure, we really have the answer here. It's not rocket science. It's really just pipes, right, and upgrades and things that we know work. It's just a matter of the infrastructure that we have out there now is very old. I actually had my commute interrupted several months ago now by a 127-year-old water main breaking underneath Times Square. So if that doesn't indicate to you how old our infrastructure really is, that's just one example. But I think that water infrastructure is a unique opportunity because we do have the answer, right? Unlike some of these other challenges.
The investment ideas really span sectors, and of course, in addition to having these longer-term and tactical opportunities related to the theme, we also have a sustainability angle here that really matters.
A strategic engagement means there is a target in mind, right? These companies are in transition. It will take some time, but at the same time, we have to recognize that, if they're on the right path and they're meeting the requirements that we have in terms of minimizing that harm, that in the long term, they will emerge to be winners. And at the end of the day, these are companies that we can't switch off tomorrow. We can't just exclude from our economies. So it is, in a way, our opportunity as investors to be stewards of that capital down the road.
It's very much a two-way dance, right, between investors and companies on these conversations. And that's where, to Antonia's point earlier, really kind of us understanding companies that are providing the solutions, but also engaging with them to give them the roadmap and the opportunity to improve on some of these areas in ways that are accretive to us as investors, really can add value here on sustainability and on our portfolios in the near and longer term. Thank you both for this great conversation. I feel like we should have had some water in front of us to advertise it, but this is all the time that we have for today. And thank you to the audience for staying with us. For more information, of course, please visit ubs.com/views. And remember that UBS Trending is on social media. Follow us on Instagram at UBS Trending for content that you won't find anywhere else. And you can also check out LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter for more. And as always, if you have any questions about your portfolio, please speak with an advisor. Until next time, I'm Amantia Muedini, filling in for Anthony. Have a great day, and please remember to keep your eyes on what's trending.